Thank you for that introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Right, my task here today is very simple. I think I will be brief. So basically, is to first outline the legislative framework under which we operate at the Real Estate Board, the role of the Real Estate Board, and the challenges that the REB currently faces, especially with property developers. Just trying to get used to. Right. So as a regulatory body, we operate under the Real Estate Dealers and Developers Act. Its regulation. And as a competent authority under the Proceeds of Crime Act, by virtue of the Proceeds of Crime designated non-financial institution real estate dealers order of 2013, the Terrorism Prevention Act and its regulations and amendments by virtue of the designated Reporting Real Estate Dealers Order of 2017 and the United Nations Security Council Resolution Implementation Act 2019. The Real Estate Board was established to regulate and monitor the practice of real estate business in Jamaica, as well as the sale, disposal of land through private development schemes. And I just want to give a little bit of history about the Real Estate Board, a little bit further than that. It was actually established sometime in the 80s after what the Duffus Commission was convened and a recommendation from that commission. Now, at that time, the government was getting a lot of complaints from persons who would have invested in land transactions, and hence that commission was convened. And the commissioner had recommended the enactment of that legislation, out of which the Real Estate Board is now a creature, was established to regulate the industry. Now, the functions of the Real Estate Board are outlined in Section 5 of the Real Estate Dealers and Developers Act. And one of those functions is to consider and determine applications for practitioners, such as the registration and renewal of registration as real estate developer. Now, a real estate developer can be an entity or an individual. And the decision to register with the Real Estate Board can come through two considerations. One, it can be quantity, and two, frequency. Quantity in the sense that if an individual or entity decide to develop a property, whether the building units or subdivide a land, once it is over 5, they are required to be registered with the Real Estate Board. Frequency, if an individual or entity develop a property under 5, and within another 24 months, they are going to do another development, whether it is completed or not, then they are required to register that second development or any thereafter. So there we go with the two conditions under which real estate developers are required to be registered with the Real Estate Board. Now, real estate developers are granted registration, so they are placed on our book of register, and they are required to renew their registration every year. In fact, that registration is expired on the 31st of March each year. We also register real estate dealers and real estate salesmen. The difference with the dealers and the salesmen is that they are granted license. So after that first step, which is the approval of a registration, they then are issued with license, which expires also on the 31st of March each year. In addition to issuing applications, we also monitor the activities of real estate developers in many ways. And that is done in the sense that a core function of the real estate board is to protect purchasers and their interests under what we refer to as prepayment contract. So this is a situation where a developer who is registered with the real estate board and carrying out his real estate business may choose to enter into contract with individuals before that development is completed. Now, our monitoring will look at certain conditions that are required by the developers when entered into prepayment contracts, such as each of those contracts, the developer is expected to forward a copy of the contracts to the real estate board within 14 days of signing, and they are required to establish a trust account to put the money that they collect from those purchasers or depositors in within an authorized financial institution. We also make inquiries and collect information as it deems necessary in the execution of our functions. And so we have an investigative arm within the real estate board. Generally, to take any other lawful measures as it may consider necessary to assist in the carrying out of its functions under the Real Estate Dealers and Developers Act. The Real Estate Board is also the competent authority of the real estate industry by virtue of those designation orders that I spoke about for the Proceeds of Crime Act as well as the Terrorism Prevention Act. Now, those designation orders would capture real estate dealers and by extension real estate salesmen. And why real estate salesmen? They are directly employed by real estate dealers. And we are required to monitor them as in the capacity as competent authority and as reporting entities by virtue of the designation order. And of course, we have been doing that through risk-based supervision by virtue of our risk assessment that was conducted within the real estate industry, and of course that was fed into the NRA, which is the National Risk Assessment, National Risk Assessment, right? Now the board is currently not authorized to monitor real estate developers, and you may have heard Nikolai spoke about that as competent authority. And the reason for that is the wording of the designation orders indicate practitioners that are licensed. And as I said before, real estate developers are not granted license, they are registered. And as a result, they were exempted. They are not required or considered reporting entities. Now, this is of some concern. The national risk assessment that was conducted identified real estate dealers as medium low risk. And that was mainly because real estate dealers, even though they can establish client's account and collect purchasers' money on a wide scale. That is something that they do not do. However, real estate developers who are not are considered under the designation order were considered to be high risk. One of the main reasons for that is once an entity or an individual applies to the real estate board to be registered as a developer, and that application is approved, that developer can market their own properties or property without using a real estate dealer. Now, what happens is that the dealer, who is a reporting entity by virtue of the designation order, is allowed, once they are engaging with a client, to carry out all that customer due diligence that is required. The developer, who has that same, somewhat similar to what the dealer is doing, is not required to carry out any due diligence on their clients. And so what happened, you may find a situation where a purchaser or potential purchaser engages a real estate dealer who may be given or have some contractual arrangement with a developer to market their property. That purchaser engaging the dealer, and the dealer would indicate to the purchaser that we need to carry out some due diligence, provide them with that customer or your customer form. But that customer, being aware of that loophole, can just simply go directly to the developer and bypass that process. So that is a huge loophole. Now, in addition, there are three overarching and interrelated challenges that the board faces in the regulation of real estate developers. And of course, is the lack of regulatory mandate for developers for the AML CFT monitoring. And that is what I've spoke about as it relates to the designation order. As well as, based on what is required at the initial stage under the Real Estate Dealers and Developers Act, we are not empowered to request certain information from the developer. All that is required, they are to provide a police certificate so as to ensure that they have not been convicted of any real estate related offenses or fraud or any form of order of bankruptcy have been made against them that is undischarged. And so certain other due diligence or aspects as it relates to money laundering are how they would have acquire their financing for development scheme. We are somewhat bounded or limited to carry out that level of due diligence. And so, having been aware of this limitation, the board, and in a collaboration with our supervisor body, the BOJ, FID, we are now taking steps to make some legislative amendment, to make some recommendation for legislative amendment. Of course, we were going through a process in terms of amendments, because soon, sometime probably throughout 2023, you will be hearing about a merger of the Real Estate Board, the Commission of Strata Corporation, and they are now working on shared communities. So you'll have the Real Estate Authority of Jamaica, REAJ, coming up. That one body covers all real estate entities. And so in looking at that legislation, the gaps that exist where AML CFT monitoring of developers is concerned, it is being considered. Lack of training and general information / education related to real estate developers. Now, this may be alarming to you. Real estate dealers and salesmen are properly educated. A dealer may be required to have a first degree from UTech, depending on what areas of practice he intends to do. As well as we have a real estate training institute that provides training at the initial stage for real estate salesmen, as well as dealers by extension. They can go on and do some further training. However, a developer is required to have no formal education. Now, this is, in my view, it's a serious issue. Because a developer is entrusted, once he's registered, as I said before, with the real estate board, he's entrusted with millions of dollars of persons or entities' money. Now, during my interview, I would have said that there are several professionals who are likely to be around a developer: lawyers, real estate dealers, accountants, and bankers. But the sad thing about it is that all these professionals around the developers does not remove the obligation of the developer when it comes to the Real Estate Dealers and Developers Act. So where there are shortfalls, even if the developer was to be misguided by any of these professionals, the developer is held accountable. While being at the real estate board, because I started as an investigator, I would have recognized a lot of issues that, had it been that developers were more educated, they would not have occurred. And so every forum and every opportunity that I get, I normally say to my superiors, developers are to be trained. The good thing is that those recommendations seem to be bearing fruit, and we are heading into that direction. The only thing is that the mandate came back on me to prepare a curriculum for the developers. So I am wondering if I should keep if I did the wrong thing in making those recommendations. No, I didn't. Because I saw the problem. There are problems there. And the developers being educated is important. There can be confidentiality issues. The POCA requires that whenever a reporting entity collects information on clients, it must be kept confidential. The challenge is you may have developers who does ongoing developments, and you may have a one-off developer. A one-off developer can be a problem because that developer probably just have one piece of property, develop that property, but will be required to collect, after the legislative change, a whole host of information on clients. The question is, what happens to that information after the completion of that development and the developer pass that and provide documentation that development is completed? I know that legislation may exist to the Data Protection Act requires that individuals, entities protect clients' data but we still would have to put some consideration into that aspect of it. There's also the potential to use complex loans or credit finance schemes, as it is mandated that developers should use authorized financial institutions to finance their development. And I just want to explain something here quickly. Before a developer is registered with the board, another criteria is that we ensure that there is no undischarged mortgage on that title. Now, it can be a situation where after the developer is registered with the board, he chooses to seek financing from an institution. If he intends to enter into prepayment contract, that institution should be an authorized financial institution. Surprisingly, I've seen situations where developers are financed by institution that is not authorized. And I can tell you, we recently identified a situation where a developer actually registered, started to collect purchasers' funds, and then go and accept financing from an unauthorized financial institution. Now, what that does is to put the purchasers at risk, because a part of our effort to protect purchasers is to ensure that a non-financial mortgage or charge is lodged on the title of that property before purchaser's money can be utilized. And of course, I said utilized because the developer not only can accept purchaser's money, he can use purchaser's money and the development scheme to recover or to assist with construction costs under certain conditions. And that's part of our monitoring. In concluding, what we discover is that the REB encounters challenges to regulate the real estate developers. And in its capacity as a regulatory body and as also a competent authority, there are legislative amendments that is on way to address this issue, and it will be addressed. But what we discover is that a mere amendment to the designation order may not be sufficient to address the issue. Why I'm saying this is that there are considerations to amend the designation order because the length of time it takes to go through the process to amend a legislation, it may, the risk exists at a longer time. However, just want to point out here that the designation order that is that are there for both the TP and the POCA for real estate dealers, if that was to be used for the developers, there could be some gaps. Because a real estate developer could register, enter into prepayment contract, indicate that they do not intend to enter into prepayment contract and build and complete that development, and then say to us, provide us with that those documents to say it is completed, compliance certificate of practical completion, and then go outside of the regulatory framework and market those properties. So the designation order would not satisfy that condition. And so we do believe that legislative changes is necessary to address this problem. I did indicate to the moderator that I would be brief, And so this is my short presentation on real estate developers. Thank you.